Hello everyone, welcome to the International Knowledge Aware Association's first quarterly webinar, titled Knowledge Aware Primer. In this presentation, we'll introduce the Knowledge Aware approach by covering some high-level topics. In other webinars, we'll get into more implementation details and instructions on how to adopt the Knowledge Aware approach. Alright, before we begin, I'm going to first introduce ourselves. I'm Brittany Satterfield, the IKAA Board Secretary. I like to call myself a knowledge aware enthusiast. I have adopted the knowledge aware approach throughout the planning process of my annual Knowledge Aware conference and throughout my marketing efforts. Presenting with me is Jeff Maffa. Jeff is one of the founding members of the International Knowledge Aware Association and a board member. Jeff has over 15 years of experience with the knowledge aware approach and has been one of the primary contributors of the concept of knowledge aware. Jeff's knowledge aware experience spans from his time at Ford Motor Company and currently with Auros Knowledge Systems. Throughout this webinar, we'll be highlighting the major areas of knowledge aware. First, we'll be introducing you to the International Knowledge Aware Association. We'll share a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how the association was created. Next, we'll break down the knowledge aware approach. We'll tell you more about what it is, how it works, and the benefits it provides. And following that, we'll share some great resources we have available for you today. And just for attending, we have a special discount code to register for this year's Knowledge Aware Conference. I'll be telling you more about that in just a bit. All right, before I pass it off to Jeff to talk about the Knowledge Aware approach, I want to quickly introduce the International Knowledge Aware Association. The mission of our association is to assist individuals and organizations in transforming through knowledge aware concepts. This webinar and our annual Knowledge Aware Conference are some of the efforts we undertake to pursue that mission. All right, so now I'm going to pass it off to Jeff to talk about the knowledge aware approach.
Thank you, Brittany. And thank all of you for joining today, and I hope that some of you will join us in spreading the ideas that are in the knowledge aware concept. At the IKAA, it is our observation that a confluence of emerging technologies has enabled a disruptive change to the way knowledge is getting managed. And collectively, we call this new technique knowledge aware. Another way to define knowledge aware is that it's a coherent and comprehensive enterprise-level knowledge management strategy. Importantly, the knowledge aware strategy is very different from the traditional legacy approaches to managing knowledge. Take a look at this graphic. Does it resonate with you? We usually get a pretty good response and some smirks when people see the graphic, some good stories. But users tend to agree the graphic epitomizes the experience with tools they're currently using to reuse knowledge. Poor little guy, buried under documents. This legacy approach relies on documents, albeit virtualized documents, and the primary means of capturing and conveying know-how. We can spend a lot of time discussing the failure modes of document-based approaches for managing knowledge. In fact, we have specifically enumerated 7 critically debilitating failure modes of document-based approaches, and these can be found in the list of useful knowledge-aware resources Brittany has compiled. She'll be sharing with you at the end of the conference, or at the end of the webinar, sorry. For now, let's just say this legacy document-based approach for managing knowledge has suboptimal characteristics. Knowledge aware is different. Knowledge aware is an active, integrated approach to managing knowledge. And it has 2 hallmark capabilities that are at the essence of what we're after. And that is continuous learning and effortless recall. These require a bit of explanation, so let's get into this. These 2 capabilities are a yin and a yang, have a yin and a yang interdependency, and we'll talk about that. But we'll pursue the description through this illustrative story. Consider how a child learns. The child approaches a stove with a red-hot burner, reaches out. We don't like that to happen, right? You can think about what the analogous thing is in your everyday work experience, touching that hot stove. The child has learned not to touch it, but is that really impactful, right? Really, the benefit only comes with its counterpart, with recall. The child subsequently sees the stove again, sees the red burner, and the child instantly recalls the lesson and doesn't touch the stove. The problem is avoided. The pain is avoided through the cycle of learning and recall. Not through learning, but also through recall. So further, the child may be able to instruct a sibling not to touch the red stove in a similar circumstance. And the sibling now has also had the benefit of the learning. You can see from this example that a child's ability to learn and recall effortlessly is a powerful tool with great benefits. Now consider what could be accomplished at your organization if your organization had the capabilities of continuous learning and effortless recall. Well, the benefits really are manyfold, and I think it's fairly self-evident what they might be, but early knowledge-aware adopters have stated some things like this. The elimination of recurring mistakes. Let's go and have continuous knowledge sharing and preservation. Improve efficiency. Efficiency comes with reduction of mistakes. The reduction of undesirable variation of process and technique. Different teams doing the same thing in different ways across time, geography, product lines. Undesirable variation reduces, is undesirable. And then one probably less intuitive outcome of continuous learning and effortless recall is that with this enterprise strategy is that it would invariably reduce the footprint and resources required to do knowledge management. As the strategy is comprehensive, the individual siloed information becomes unitized in a single process for knowledge capture and sharing. Big benefit. Okay, so the obvious question becomes now at the enterprise level, it's easy for a child. What does my organization, how can it create this capability of continuous learning and effortless recall? It's much, much different for an organization. Now, while there are many details in the technique of acquiring the knowledge-aware capabilities, at the highest level, the process has two fundamental steps. Create some knowledge packets and provision some knowledge. Okay, so let's get into some of the details of what that means. The knowledge packet concept itself is an extremely powerful one. The idea is that knowledge is best captured, managed, and reused in granular, modular, and actionable units. And the knowledge-aware approach calls these things knowledge packets. One way to think of this is if you start with the legacy document space, you can, like SharePoint, finding the discrete and useful elements and transforming them or uplifting them into a new transformed format called the knowledge packet. That's the way to think about it. So you're taking the documents and breaking it down into these knowledge packets. But let's dig it a little bit deeper. The concept of knowledge packets is important because the knowledge-aware technique relies on the prescripted formulation of the knowledge packet that yields the properties I previously mentioned, granular, modular, actionable. So let's talk about granular first. So what do we mean by that? Granular in that knowledge packets naturally promote knowledge representations that are at the same level or common level of granularity without being alternately verbose on a topic or incomplete on a topic. Consistency of granularity, as you well can imagine, is really important in knowledge reuse. It helps the user be efficient in reusing knowledge, having consistent granularity. Next, modular. Okay, so modularity of a knowledge packet is somewhat analogous to Lego bricks. Bricks of one type are easily connected to a brick of another type. That is, their interfaces are abstracted. Modular. Now, I don't want to overdo the metaphor here, but the knowledge packet should be able to connect or share interfaces and be a model in and of itself, and that it can interact with other knowledge packets. Ultimately, this implies that complexity can be built bottom up. That's a really important topic for another day, building complexity bottom up. Anyway, for now, the capability is not possible with documents. Lastly, actionable. Actionable has many dimensions. I'll talk about two here. First is the removal of fluff. Too often, documents that are geared for preserving knowledge are written by experts who tend to associate value with word count. Have you seen that before? Fluff is a big problem for efficient knowledge reuse. So knowledge packets tend to avoid that, have mechanisms for avoiding that. And secondly, actionable refers to orienting knowledge towards reuse. In the automotive world, I'll draw on a few of my favorite examples from a design guide I once used. I paraphrase here: design your part to be as lightweight as possible. Or in another case, avoid process iterations to save time. These things written into design guides or standards manuals or other instructions or lessons are not actionable at all. I'll try to come up here with a counterpart that would be actionable, something more like use material X under condition B, and that will help to reduce weight, or follow sequence A, B, C, and alternately D to avoid potential iteration of process. Okay, and you can see the difference. And if the knowledge packet itself can promote these kinds of attributes, whereas a document promotes no kind of attributes, then we're going to get further towards our goal of continuous learning and effortless recall, as we'll see as we evolve the story in a little bit more detail. So you probably surmised so far that the knowledge packet design is an important and key step on the knowledge-aware journey. Fortunately, we've spent a lot of time on this, and the knowledge-aware technique is quite prescriptive on the topic, and a good and broad design is available. The current prescription and design for knowledge packets has been proven effective at managing a lot of different knowledge types: rules, constraints, methods, process knowledge, lessons, standards, specification, requirements, best practices, regulations, and more. Hopefully some of those sound familiar to you and are of interest in managing knowledge at your own organization. Okay, and knowledge packets will probably or likely be the subject of a future webinar from the IKAA. Okay, so knowledge packets is the first thing. The second thing is provisioning of knowledge, okay? And the second step in achieving knowledge aware. So you got knowledge packets, you got representations of know-how that have these cool little attributes that we just talked about, but now we got to get them moving. We got to get them active. So we talk about knowledge provisioning. So again, we're going to turn to a metaphor to explain this. And I'm going to draw upon a very real experience that I had. It was some time ago, but consider the map. Maybe 15 years ago, I had to travel to Bristol in the UK for some business. I purchased a map that looked exactly like that A to Z map. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was an A to Z map. It looked like that folded one on the left, and when they open it up, it looks like the background here, okay? And despite my best efforts to memorize the map in advance and know where I was going to turn, I actually lost my way a bit, and I became stuck between two circuses. Hopefully you guys know what a circus is. Those are little circle things on the map. And I was going back and forth around these two circuses as I was trying to buy time and look down and read a map, okay, where all possible turns were available, and I was on the wrong side of the road. Some of you can understand that experience. Anyway, so this is not a good way to try to learn or to reuse knowledge. Doesn't work out very well. So what we see here is a very good example of how navigation is more of an active, in the flow, provisioned type concept versus the paper map. Navigation on your cell phone is analogous to provisioning of knowledge into the flow of your work. So what does that look like at your organization? Okay, like the child learning, it's a metaphor, but how does it actually map? This is how it maps. In the case of navigation context is sensed by your GPS on your phone. It knows where you are, and the context is constantly changing as you drive. In your organization, projects and process context is constantly changing. Not as continuously, perhaps, as the case of GPS and navigation, but it is changing, right? And maybe changing the phase of the project, maybe changing the assumption of your project, material choice may be changing, new or modified deliverables. And as that context changes, your company's experience, your organization's experience, knowledge, and wisdom that needs to be applied is changing, right? To mitigate risk or increase performance. Doesn't it make sense that in today's world with today's technology, we can and should be provisioning the precise knowledge from the various experts and stakeholders to the project, the turn by turn, instead of unfolding a map and looking at everything? Immediately as the context changed, the benefits would be analogous and comparable to the navigation example. Why in business are we relying on paper unfurled maps, the equivalent of them anyway? We should be looking at provisioning, okay? And this is a cornerstone of the knowledge-aware approach. At this point now in our journey, you should be thinking to your skeptical self, well, that sounds good, but I don't think my organization is ready for this. We're not going to create knowledge packets. That sounds hard. We've got to maintain them too. We're used to documents. We're too busy, right? Yeah, that is a logical conclusion. So how is it in reality? In reality, it's not that way because there's a little magic concept or outcome. It's called a virtuous cycle. And it works something like this. And to better understand it, I'm going to talk about an experience that I had about where virtual cycles take over and success begets success and causes a change in the way people do business without really thinking about it. And this is what typically happens in the knowledge-aware process. When I first got out of college, my area manager did not read his email. True story. Granted, it was in early days of emails, and I'm kind of old, but he didn't. He printed it out, and he would write his correspondence by hand and have his assistant put it into an inter-office memoranda envelope. 3 to 4 days later, maybe, his colleague could read his response. This story does have a happy ending, however. Within 3 or 4 months of my arrival at Ford, my area manager had started to shift and use email. Why did he start to write his own email? It was extra effort before, right? It was different than the way he was doing it, but he was doing it. Why? And the answer is pretty straightforward. Because he started to internalize that the new model of communication was better. When he wrote his own emails, he could convey his ideas, needs, or wants in the same day. He could actually get a response and respond again, all in that same short period of time. And this was an obvious and superior outcome, so he began to use email. And you know what happened? His peers saw that, and their peers started to use email. And as more individuals started to use email in real time, the email model became ever more compelling, both the individuals and the organization as a whole, and it became a self-fulfilling virtuous cycle. More and more email would be used, right? I won't get into, and for kids today, there's analogous, right? They're moving from one communication mode to something else that's more better, and it doesn't take a lot of effort, Snapchat, whatever it is. Now, there's an interesting concept for those of you who are into some of these kinds of academic things, detail not here, but if you're familiar with Metcalfes Law, that's governing the value of a network, and that's at play here, and you get exponential returns for the growing network. The conclusion is that at a certain point, the value proposition to individuals participating was high enough, and that virtuous cycle is achieved, success begets success. In the case of knowledge provisioning, it becomes obvious and a superior way to communicate, and knowledge packets are created, provisioning works, and we get better and better results. And it's not hard for organizations to change. Okay. And with the attainment of that virtuous cycle, knowledge packets and provisioning of knowledge, we can now conclude upon the 2 hallmark capabilities we started with: continuous learning and effort recall, and the benefits that they could provide to your company. Given the confluence of new technologies making the knowledge-aware approach easier every day, it would seem that the approach has become inevitable. I truly believe it is inevitable. The concepts are strong, the technology is at hand, it's a better way of communicating. Documents are good for some things, knowledge management just isn't one of them. Okay, so the point of this primer wasn't to be exhaustively prescriptive. Our purpose today was simply to explain the knowledge-aware approach why it's important, how it can be impactful to your business, to virtually any business or organization. And we certainly hope that the primer has piqued your interest. Brittany?
All right, thanks, Jeff. That was a lot of great information and plenty for our audience to take away. All right, so now it's time for the Q&A session. At this time, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box on your screen. For now, we're going to get started by answering the questions that were asked earlier in the presentation. This first question, can I get a copy of this presentation? The answer to that is yes. I'll be sending out recordings of this webinar later on this week so you can watch it again or share it with your organization. The second question, this one's for you, Jeff. What is the biggest benefit KnowledgeAware has provided your organization?
Okay. At my home organization of Auros Knowledge Systems, we broadly apply these concepts to our business. And it's interesting, we apply KnowledgeAware concepts to the software factory process, to consulting practice, even to HR and hiring practices. So I would say only that we enjoy the benefits that we just talked about, that when we learn something new, we can be confident it's going to improve some future aspect of business, and that we learn and we recall and enjoy those benefits.
All right, great. All right, we're still waiting on some more questions to come in. Again, if you have any, go ahead and pull down your chat box and type them in, send it to our host, and we will see them. We'll give you about a couple more seconds.
Well, Brittany, while we're waiting, if any more questions, why don't you continue and talk about the resources available with IKAA?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so before you guys leave, I want to share some of these great resources that are available for you today, including the 7 failure modes of document-centric approaches to knowledge management Jeff mentioned earlier. So everything you see on our screen is available on the IKAA website, which is knowledge-aware.org. As a follow-up, I'll email the links to these resources later on this week. And for those looking for even more information on the knowledge-aware approach, I'd like for you to consider joining the IKAA as a member. Members will receive additional resources, support, training, opportunities to collaborate with others, and more. So on the right, you'll see our annual pricing structure, but from now until 2019, the IKAA is offering complimentary memberships. So
Free.
For free.
Free.
Yes.
That means
Okay.
free.
So if you're interested in taking advantage of any of these resources, becoming a member, you can learn more about that at knowledge-aware.org. And if you're interested in learning more about the Knowledge Aware approach, consider attending the IKAA's annual Knowledge Aware conference this September. This conference is a great next step to help your organization learn about or to implement the Knowledge Aware approach. Some of the companies that will be presenting include Kohler, General Motors, Auros Knowledge Systems, and Borg Warner. So, more great news for you. Because you attended today's webinar, the IKAA is offering you a 50% off registration discount code. To take advantage of this discount, visit the conference website, which is kaaconference.org, and use the discount code IKAA50 at checkout.
We do have a couple questions. Let's just take these last 2 questions.
Sure.
Okay, so the first question is, can you share any customer success in replacing legacy processes or product specification documents? My vision is to have KPACs be authoritative. The answer to that question is yes, we have many examples. I think there aren't, of the customers that present at our conference year over year, our conference has been going on for 5 years. It's changed a couple times, but as the Knowledge Aware conference, I'd say at least half those customers presented in a way or from a business case where KPACs were authoritative, were things that needed to be enforced or abided by, if I understand that question correctly. The specific content of those, maybe if you write to us offline, I can point you to the presentations as they're available in video format on YouTube from past conferences. I know some major automotive manufacturers, I can't name by name, have done that as well at an OEM level. So, but for reasons of non-compete or intellectual property rights, my specific insights with specific customers or specific adopters of knowledge aware. We can't really talk about those, but we could point you to the right videos. The next question, can you explain the cost of converting over to the knowledge aware approach, both financial and by individual full-time equivalent in people and time? Wow, another really good question. We've attempted to develop generic financial calculators. At this point, I have the unfortunate news that the knowledge aware concept is generally new, and the number of adopters and the maturity of those adopters provides us with too few data points to give really good conversion numbers. It would be great if we had it, because I think it would be an instantaneous way to get a lot of people moving. The value is there, I'm convinced. We've convinced a lot of people there's value in the knowledge aware concept. And having like a direct business case model published by a customer that would give the transfer function of equivalency for people, I think we're not quite at that maturity. Love for your help in helping us do that. Okay, there's a few more questions. I don't think we're going to get to them today, though. We'd be happy to follow up and respond to the questions via email.
All right, so that is it. We hope you're able to learn something new in today's webinar. So I'll be sending out the recorded copy of the webinar, links to the resources mentioned earlier, and the registration discount code as well into
for the
your
conference.
Emails. Yes, for the conference. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us.
Brittany, where do they get the resources that you listed on that last one? That's on the IKAA website,
Correct.
Which is knowledge-aware.org.
Correct. Yep, and then I'll also be sending those in email, so you guys can have access to those, all complimentary. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you at the conference this September.
Join us. Thank you.
Bye, guys.